excited to have Chris Coyier here. Most of you probably already know who Chris is, but Chris is a web designer and developer that tries to help other people get better at those things. He's also co-founder of CodePen, co-founder, social development environment for web designers and developers. Chris has co-hosted a podcast called Shop Talk, a show about building websites for over 10 years and 500 episodes. He also built CSS Tricks, some of you may have heard of that one, a website all about building websites, and he ran it for 15 years from 2007 to 2022 before he sold it to DigitalOcean. So we're thrilled to have Chris here for just a fun discussion. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hope it holds out for you. Yeah, this is really cool. I don't think I've ever been to a conference that's all about content before, but I couldn't resist when you asked me that because I was like, "Oh, that sounds so cool." Yeah. I don't know, just because I live in that world, but a little outside of it because I'm mostly a tech guy, I guess. But obviously, content is pretty close to my heart.
Yep. Yeah, it was kind of I get these wacky ideas for events all the time, and I'm like, what if we talked about this? Nobody ever talks about that, so that's what I try to like. And this was one of them. So okay, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you've kind of been on both sides of like the coin here. You have been the developer who developed a site that was all like focused on content, and you have also been the the person in charge of that content and one of the main creators of that content. And so like I felt like you had a particular expertise for both of these things, especially because one of the things that it strikes me in all my years in doing this stuff is that the needs of developers tend to be pulling in one direction, and the needs of like the marketers and content creators are pulling in the other. Is that your experience too? And if so, how have you handled it?
I mean, that would be unfortunate a little bit. You'd like to think that people could all be on the same team and pulling in the same direction on things, but I think I get what you mean, that I don't know, developers often prioritize simplicity and, deterministic things and whatever, because there is some weight on developers' shoulders. Like when things go wrong, it tends to be developers who are left to pick it up, and if there's some desire to do something new on the site, guess who implements it? It's the developers, so there tends to be work put on their plate, and it tends to be a little uneven too, because an idea might come from anywhere, and how hard that is to implement is totally, who knows, it could be a afternoon or it could be a month-long thing, and be like, developers are guarded because of that. You're like, what are you going to do to me next? Kind of thing. I don't know. I think of that in a way. Whereas if you're in marketing, you're just like, oh, we should do this, and I like that. Like it's good. You want to encourage ideas. I mean that's good stuff. But without them having a technical background, which they may not, then what? That they could be coming up with a month-long development project just out of thin air.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the reason I said that is like more because I felt like, from a marketer, content creator standpoint, I want more flexibility. I want to be able to do whatever, like, and not have to ask the developer, hey, I want to be able to do this, and I need you to implement it. Whereas the developer like tends to want to kind of constrain those issues because they can cause problems on the site, maybe accessibility issues, maybe just design issues, like I suddenly give you an editor that allows you to pick colors, and then suddenly you're choosing rainbow colors for text, kind of thing. And not that happens that commonly, but just an idea that you give more flexibility, and it gives you more room to have something that is broken.
But I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. I always, have you ever used Notion, that app for?
Yes.
I don't know. It's I think it might be Markdown based under the hood, but you're really just crafting documents and databases and stuff. I always appreciated their approach to it because you can change the text color in Notion, and you can even put a background color on certain things, and you can put a header up here and stuff. But they don't let you do too much. It's
Mm.
not a totally open playing field as far as document design. There's no just arbitrary color picker in Notion. And I always liked that they put those, like, it was like bumper bowling for documents, kind of like you can't pick a bad color. You can't. All the colors, they're all going to be fine. Even yellow in Notion is kind of going to be fine, which I think which is smart. Like if you are in the CMS world, that might be tempting to look at that. Like, can we do the same kind of thing where we give people lots
Mm.
of control and you can do cool things, but nothing that's going to like totally ruin the legibility, readability, accessibility of the content.
So, okay, we got our first question from the audience. Somebody named Cassidy. You may have heard of her. Um, so, Cassidy says, Chris, I've always admired just how much content you produce all the time. Do you have like a queue of ideas that you are going, or do you just sit down and write?
I mean, also thank you, Cassidy, and I admire you as well. Cassidy also produces an absolute ton of content, so
Hmm.
high five to the content people here. Um, I tend to rock the ideas thing. So yeah, I'll give you two. One of them is I use the Mac app Things, which is just a to-do app, and it's like $50, and I just can't believe that they get that for this app. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, it's my favorite. It works so super well. Anyway, it's just
Mm.
a really nice to do app, and I use it for all kinds of stuff. But it's just personal to me. But I have like a for this blog, and it's just loaded with ideas. And I've recently even started to do like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday like bucket, and then like drag ideas into them, almost to like force myself to do it. Like that idea that's happening on that day. Or if it's something weekly, as you know, I'm at CodePen, and I've started doing since I sold CSS Tricks, I could not turn my brain off to like stop producing content. So I kind of started just doing a weekly, and Cassie does a weekly too. Y'all get her newsletter, right? Super good. Anyway, I called it Chris's Corner, maybe a little self-righteous or something there, but I put it in our weekly newsletter at CodePen. And the way that I handle that one is in Notion that I just mentioned. They have this tool called the Notion Web Clipper, which is a pretty neat tool. It's just a browser extension. And any page that you're on, you can just activate the browser extension and it will drop it into a database with like the title, the URL, some metadata. I added columns like tags. So if it's an article about CSS, I'll tag it CSS. And things like that. And I'll just accumulate this big database full of links, right? Like if Cassidy writes a great article, which she does all the time, it'll probably end up in there and I'll probably tag it. And then by virtue of the tags, I'll be like, ooh, I have like 5 tags about that thing. I wonder if there's like something in the water in the industry right now. And I can kind of connect the threads in a way somehow. I'll try to do that if I can. So that ends up being like a source for writing that I won't just like sit down and be like, what should I write about? Chances are I'll be staring at this like wall of links, trying to find something that I want to say about them in a way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, and
that's that.
I've loved, especially on your blog lately, like ever since you moved on from CSS Tricks, like you're kind of talking about all different topics, and you usually pick like, oh, here's a blog post I found interesting that kind of spurred a bunch of thoughts, and go from there.
Mhm.
And it's been like I enjoy reading those a lot. And Cassidy also says that she's a huge fan of Chris's Corner, by the way. So.
Nice. I get really weirdly little feedback on that. That newsletter that is mostly written by Marie Mosley at CodeBen. She picks out the stuff that goes into that newsletter and we send it out each week. Is read by millions of people. It's just, but for whatever reason, the medium or something, it's not like we get a lot of people that hit reply to the email and respond. Maybe they know they can't do that. There's not exactly a call to action in there, but yeah, I get
Mhm.
it's weird to write and get so little feedback, but I guess that's a part of content too, for anybody out there running documentation sites or blogs or anything. Do you choose to accept feedback. Like in documentations, you'll see like the thumbs up, thumbs down. I think that's a kind of a cool, lightweight way to get feedback. Was this page helpful or not? But on a blog, it's often just a comment form, and that's
Mm.
a real choice to
Oh
turn
yeah,
that on or off.
I took them off because it just wasn't like that. I didn't get very many in the ones I was getting. I mean, granted, my blog doesn't get much traffic, and
Yeah, it could be a lot
partly
of
because I don't get
technology for a little. Hmm.
yeah, but even when I did some, they were often like irrelevant or spammy. But Cassidy, as a follow-up question, how often do you revisit your old content and or rewrite any of it, if ever?
Well, that's a good question. On CSS Tricks, it was pretty often actually. Uh, Surprisingly so. For example, I'd have a page, like an admin page, that would just list all the articles we had in our almanac. On that page, that was like a almost like alphabetical list of CSS features, values, and properties. And I would just have a dumb WordPress loop that would just query for all of them, like return them all and order them by last updated date in descending order or whatever, the oldest ones at the top. So you'd be like, ooh, that page hasn't been touched since like 2009, like that probably would do it. And I would just, that's like couch writing. Just hit the edit button on that post, look in there. You can even do it mindlessly, like, oh, this isn't using like some of the latest conventions that we do in these posts. So I'll just fix that up. And that kind of turns your brain on and be like, oh, that's not right anymore. Let me fix that up quick, and just hit save. And you get this like internal good feeling that the last updated date on it is newer, which you could see in the almanac. It would say last updated on, And I even think that Google appreciates that too. And and that's just a feel that I don't have anything to back that up, but I have a feeling when I had a gut instinct that, Google was good SEO wise to CSS tricks, and that, and that,
Yeah.
could tell that updated content, maybe they gave us some points for that or something.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
on my personal blog, I don't go back that often. What helped was when WordPress switched from the old editor to the new block editor. You could open it up and you could click this very satisfying button that would be like update to blocks, and it would like attempt to make it into the block editor, and I'd be like, yeah, that looks good, and then I would save it. And it was just a cheap way to just look at an old post, because that my personal blog's been around even longer. And when I was writing, I was like in my young 20s and stuff, and I would write some stuff that was a little like, either really dumb or like maybe put in something that might even have been like something you consider hurtful these days. I'd say a word that we don't say anymore, something like that. And a lot of times I just delete it. Be like, I'm not such an archivist that old dumb thought needed to stick around, like, be gone with it. So
yeah, I remember once upon a time I basically wiped a year's worth of blog history just because it was just going to be. It's like, oh, I don't, it's fine. Nobody needs to go back to those. The world, but it was going to be a pain to migrate it. And anyway, so okay, let's see. We got one more question. I'm going to go back to the questions here. Kaio asks, what kind of tag do you put on the articles? So I guess he's talking about when you tag the links and put them into your system. What kind of tags do you put on them?
yeah, that's a good question. You don't have to tag anything if you don't want to, just that is a choice. And I think it should be a premeditated choice that happens early on. I think it's always weird to me to just 2 years into producing content somewhere and be like, I'm going to just put the tag lunch on this one, like, what are you doing? It's almost worse to
Yeah.
me to do that. Cause then you're like, then now you have this half-assed tag system that's just not helping anybody. I feel like if you're going to do it, you're like, you know what? I'm going to start taking content taxonomy seriously. Then take it seriously. Then schedule a day or something where you're going to go tag everything you ever wrote on this site, and then incorporate it into the design of the site so that the tags are really there. That can be useful. It can be cool. I'm sometimes jealous of sites that have like really good, robust tagging stuff. You ever read Kottke.org? He has been tagging for a million years on that site. And I feel like it's almost like second brainy People swear by it in Obsidian, right? That it's the tags are this way to connect content when you're leaving your notes and stuff that help your brain draw connections to things that it should be. That can be true of a content site as well. Be like, when's the last time I posted something about cool typography? Maybe typography is a tag then on your site, and just clicking on that tag will show you everything you ever wrote about it. I think there's some value there. I don't know if there's SEO value there. I don't know. It seems to me like a tricky. I don't know. Like I don't know that there's so much value in tags that every site in the world should do it. Unclear.
Yeah, I struggled with this even like from CFE because we added tags, but because I had like kind of top level categories and they got so big that I'm like, well, it's not very useful anymore. You need to kind of
and you said category, not tag, right? Some sites, WordPress is notorious for this, has had both. But what's the difference? What's the difference between a category and a tag? They have some really in the UI of the site, but really it's just an arbitrary taxonomy. And it just so happens that they made categories. How do you say it? Like they can have a parent-child relationship, whereas tags are flat and cannot. But these are true questions for the real content strategists, which is not me really.
Yeah, not me either. But I put them. The difference for me was the categories were broad and tags were very precise. So like
right.
So by the way, Cassidy mentions there's a plugin for Obsidian called Tag Wrangler that's amazing. It's open source, and you want to apply it to your other stuff. I think, yeah. So.
What I could see would be cool is even if there's some AI tool or something that could look at a whole body of work and suggest tags for it and then make it more like a okay, not okay system. Because doesn't that sound daunting? Did anybody sweat when I said, go back through your entire body of work and apply tags to it? Yeah, that sounds awful. But you can imagine a one-time use AI tool kind of helping you with that, which could be cool.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I mean, I only had like 250 things to go back through, but it still was a pain in the butt. Go one by one, manually tagging them. I do want to actually get a little bit to the tools and technology, like you built stuff with. So, because you did CSS Tricks was WordPress. Your blog you said was WordPress or is WordPress, right? And then, but you've also, I remember you doing a lot of stuff with like Jamstack tools and other headless type stuff. What in your experience, like having done kind of both things, where do you like? How do you choose between them for a project? What are the pros and cons that you see in each? I know we only got 20 minutes. So
it's the ultimate question, though, isn't it? And I feel super strongly about how weird we've gotten ourselves into in the world of content, because I'm like hot on both trains. Meaning like I like my WordPress, baby. I have a lot of years invested up into it. And I think the content creation story on WordPress is phenomenal. I can write a blog post so fast in such a satisfying way. Oh, type. Ooh, select. I'm going to hit Command B and bold that sentence. Ooh, I need a video or like an image. I'm just going to drag and drop it in there and I'm going to upload it and it's going to be optimized. It's going to use responsive images, can do all this smart stuff. Ooh, I need to have two left and right columns over here. Oh, and the left column, I'm going to make a highlight color with a background of orange. And like you can do all this stuff with just clicky, click, 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 click. It's amazing. And then I just hit publish. I can have pre-publishing reminders in there. I could tell you if I made a list of 100 things that makes creating content in WordPress great, I could do it. I could tell you, man, this is an amazing place to write content. But the DX of building sites in WordPress, well, it's not like groundbreakingly awful. It's kind of bad. Like this idea of handcrafting PHP templates, and Prettier doesn't even really do PHP that well. Can you imagine writing code without Prettier? It's the worst. They don't really have a good story for componentry, which is like all the developers of the entire world. Every JavaScript framework in the world is like, oh, you build components, you pass it props, and you style the components themselves, and that's how you build sites. The DX has skyrocketed on that side of the fence. And Jamstack gets to take advantage of that. A lot of the Jamstack key sites, like Astro, I'm totally on the Astro train. It's an amazing product. Says build whatever components you want. I mean, I end up thinking you're going to veer towards using Astro components, but still, like they support Svelte components and all that stuff. And they have a pretty good story that way. Like the DX world in Jamstack land is so good. It's phenomenally better than WordPress. So isn't that weird? Like it's when you start a new site, you're like, do I want my beautiful content creation machine WordPress or do, but then on Jamstack said it's like, just use Markdown. You're like, yeah, Markdown's okay. I don't like hate
Yeah.
Markdown, but then if you're really seriously going to be making a lot of content quickly, you probably should hate Markdown. It's not, I don't find it an efficient way to craft stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. It just feels it's a weird situation.
You kind of made my point about like the two sides pulling in different directions, right? Like, oh, but this is my great, writing experience, but that's my great developer experience, and somehow they're like, they can't seem to have both at the same time. And even getting to Markdown, like one of the things I've often had to remind developers are like, but why can't they just write Markdown? Like we're talking about content, like content writers who are not developers, and it's like Markdown's actually kind of difficult. It's like, I mean, in that it's easy, but I can't do everything, right? Like so I have to teach you Markdown. It's like, and then they're like, well, how do I add this? I need an anchor link here. Oh, well, you can't do anchor links.
Yeah, even
Markdown.
links are
Really?
annoying,
Yeah. So it's like, now I got to teach you HTML to add that anchor link in. Just do a little HTML here and a little HTML there, and then now I'm teaching you HTML and Markdown, right?
Oh,
So
I mean, the second that you're like, oh, just use some HTML in your Markdown, you've already lost. I think it's not good.
Yeah.
Although I'm not,
I mean,
I think
I
I
love
feel a
Markdown.
little differently about MDX because I feel like that actually kind of makes sense that they're my components that I crafted that I want to use in there. That maybe makes a
Mhm.
little more sense. But yeah, it's God, I feel like I'm being anti-Markdown, but I feel like Markdown's great for your notes and a
Yeah.
comment form where you're just writing little stuff, and if the people that like it, and if you don't, you don't have to use it. It's not a big deal. But as to be like the number one format for your whole CMS for perhaps a whole team, doesn't feel right to me. It's funny about when WordPress went to the block editor thing, it used to be called Gutenberg. Now it's just this block editor or whatever. That is an independent open source project, and they've been big on showing off other people using it. Like Drupal is another big CMS. I don't know if Drupal people showed up here, but it's still going strong, very popular, very big in government, that type of thing. You can use the same block editor in WordPress in Drupal if you want. There's other writing apps that use the block editor. They're saying, please use the block editor. In fact, their mobile app, which is not a web wrapper, it's like native code. They made the block editor work in native code as well. So you can use it in that app, and it's totally open source. So it's kind of like, it's got me like, ooh, I wonder if that's going to I applaud them for doing that, but if Jamstack could pick up that great block editor experience and deliver that, and which I can't imagine is even particularly difficult. It's like, man, that's what I want. I want the best of both worlds. So you'd think that I'd be like you and be like, I'm going to do everything headless. I'm going to make a WordPress install. I'm going to have edge functions, grab the content from WordPress, but then build the site in Astro or Next or something. I've always been tempted by that, but to me, it's like you're standing up both of those stacks. That site, you are now responsible for twice as much maintenance and perhaps twice as much hosting and twice as much button clicking crap. And I've always been like, it's too much. I can't do it. It's too much. I
Yeah.
want the best of both
You
worlds.
answered my follow-up question, which was going to be like, have you done much headless WordPress? But yeah,
No,
no.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. It's like in a way, I mean, the reason I think it could be useful is more like from it's hard to do what I'm like if I have a particular thing that I want to build that's harder to do it like on a WordPress front end, then I could more easily do it in Jamstack. I don't know. That would be the case, I guess, but I can see how, yeah, you have to stand up
Oh,
two
I'm sure.
different
So there's
sets.
plenty of examples. Don't let me talk you out of it. I'm sure there's lots of people being successful with it. And I've had a little bit of experience in it for a little
Hmm.
while. At CodePen, I had our WordPress install. I crafted up the editor to make landing pages, fancy blocks and stuff. But I really wanted, but we install WordPress different at a different place than we install our Rails app. But I don't want my landing pages to be at the blog URL. I wanted them to look like they're at codepen.io. So we ended up wiring up a Cloudflare function that would run and make a fetch quick at the Cloudflare worker level to the WordPress site, grab the content and just put it in a blank div that was sitting on the page. So it's kind of SSR. It
Hmm.
it wasn't a client side fetch. It arrived with the HTML there. And I guess that's headless WordPress, but it was scoped down. It wasn't like we were publishing something new every day. That's what would be harder to me is like, oh, well, how do I, if I'm writing a blog, then the second that I hit publish in WordPress, what I wanted to do is fire off a webhook that then goes and rebuilds my Astro site and deploys that. That story's always been a little weak to me too, because you need that like I've deployed now to be wired up into the WordPress side, which is not, there's hooks and stuff in WordPress, but it's not a no-brainer to have the
No.
publish button trigger a webhook. That's not a first-class citizen of WordPress, let's say.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I mean, and I think also the other tricky part ends up being previews, right? Like, because I can't.
Oh, hugely, hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
you
is,
just can't see anything. You got nothing.
no, which has always been. I know there's tools like StackBit and stuff, which Netlify acquired to trying to bridge that, and even Contentful and other tools are trying to kind of build in that headless like preview, live preview kind of thing. But it has been like it is a struggle because. I mean, when you move to headless, I've been at companies that made that move, and it's like suddenly the folks in marketing are creating their page, and it's like, okay, I'm plugging this content, okay, I get it, I hit publish, I understand everything, and then suddenly it's published, and oh, that line breaks weirdly, and it just looks terrible, like it throws off the whole design, and now
Yeah.
I got to go through the whole iterative process to get that back out there before
Right. And it'd be one
you know,
thing if you were running the builds locally, but if
yeah,
it's just a content person, which that's plenty common in the world, they're not
oh
running
yeah,
your stack. They're I don't know what they're doing with if in the Jamstack world, but they're using some kind of other tool to do it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that story is weak, but it's too bad. It's like it feels like we can't be too many years away from a best of both worlds kind of situation with content creation and the DX story of Jamstack. Although I know that even saying that word is weird, but I generally mean just
yeah,
I don't know, modern site builder tools or
yeah.
something.
I have yet to come up with a good replacement term, even though I know that term is. Anyway, we could have a whole other. We'll save that for the jam.dev in January. We'll have
Sure,
that
that sounds
discussion.
great.
um, so yeah, okay. So I wanted to talk to you also about like how you deal with issues of like, because obviously your background, you also like you've been both a developer and designer, which I struggle with. I've always just been purely on developer, kind of leaning towards back end, even though I do front end stuff. Like, and how do you deal with like issues of like getting developers to better understand issues of readability and accessibility and all that stuff? I mean, I think it's something that we tend to kind of ignore because we're focused on the tools that we build something with, and then and less on how that actually is consumed by people.
Maybe. I mean, are you being self-reflective or
I
are
am,
you
I am, but
a
I
little
don't
bit?
think I'm
Okay.
alone. I don't think I'm alone.
No, but I
I think
mean,
a lot of
I don't know. I just don't want to throw you under the bus without knowing that you're talking about yourself a little bit. But
it's
don't you
okay.
think it'd
Throw me
be
under the bus.
well, I mean, wouldn't it be weird to be like, I don't know, I make the tires at the car factory. I don't know about cars. I don't know anything about driving cars. I just make the tires. That would just be like dumb. You'd be like, what are you talking about? You're part of a whole. You make tires to make driving better. Like, you can't just check out of the final experience, like you're using your tools to make something for users. So you can't just be like, I don't know, it'll be, like, I don't care about accessibility or whatever. Like, you're part of the whole story. It doesn't mean you have to be an accessibility specialist if you're like
Mhm.
way deep, you're the database administrator for some place. Like, you can say, oh, I get it. That's different. Ooh, my camera shut off.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. Hold on.
No worries. Here I would thought I would be, you'd be talking to yourself with that practical
Yeah.
hurricane that was
You're
going
gonna
on
get
here.
this.
Now
You're gonna
instead
get a
it's
new
me.
angle just for
Oh
fun.
wow.
This is my backup camera. We'll just do this. Pin it up there. What's up, everybody? Really slight. Oh, it fell down.
We're having fun here.
Yeah. I'll scooch over in front of it. That works out just fine. Yeah, I mean, I take your point though, right? Like, it's almost a cliche a little bit. They're like, oh, I'm just a back end dev. I don't know about fonts or whatever. You're like, and that's kind of fine. Like, you don't have to be a typography specialist, also.
Mhm.
But to like actively not care is worse, though. To pretend that it's not important is not cool.
Yeah.
You know?
I think, and I guess my point is like not it's not that, like, even for me, it's not that I don't care. It's just I can't, I don't know enough about it. And I feel like in many cases, I mean, it depends on where you're working, but like this idea that you're full stack. Hey, front end, back end, you could do it all, right? Like, CSS,
Yeah.
and the idea that everybody would know everything, and that you can kind of get away with having one person know all these things, and you just can't possibly do that. So,
Isn't it part of
you know,
the I feel like that's why stuff like Bootstrap became popular, because it's like, I don't know, I can't be troubled to style a
mhm.
component really, really nicely. I'm just going to use that. You're just kind of outsourcing that particular task to that tool. Not the worst idea in this case, Or if you're like, I need to make docs for a new product because I'm at a startup right now. You know how many tools out there are like, make your docs with this? Astro has their own. It's called Starlight. I've never even spun it up, but it looks nice. The Astro docs look nice. But I know there's like a Vue one that was popular because it did the Vue docs or whatever. If you pick
Oh yeah,
that, if you're like, oh, it's my job to make the docs for my new startup, you don't know nothing about fonts and typography and accessibility and legibility and readability and all that, then pick one of these because it'll look
yeah,
great.
yeah,
No.
yeah. There are. Well, I mean, that's what I guess what developers tend to do, right? Like, if you're like, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to find a tool that does it for me, right?
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
you know,
Right. It goes
um,
the other way around too. Like, right, I can't write a CMS, so I'm gonna pick one,
right.
and it's gonna help me.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I've been around for so long that, like, back in the day, we did write a lot of our own CMSs. Like, I had for a while, I was doing, freelancing actually in Wisconsin, where you're from,
Oh, heck yeah.
and I was, my freelancing was basically like, there wasn't really great CMS options. So like, it was like, oh, you need a site. I'm going to build you a front end that actually has a custom back end, and then we start to repeat that to the point where you kind of built your own CMS, but it was like customized every single time. It was
Yeah.
a business back
Yeah.
then, but yeah,
Yeah, it could be. I've never been blessed with that. Like, I feel like I was close probably, but my career trajectory went other ways. So I cannot be accused of having handcrafted my own CMS. I can see it's really
oh
tempting though. There's that what is it called? Not invented here syndrome, right? That if you're never happy with anything else, so you decide that you're going to write your own, and that can be good because then all the expertise is in house. But I feel like in this day and age, for most of the tools that we're using, that's probably more of a negative than a positive. Like, there is a
yeah.
lot of software out there that's pretty good.
Exactly. I would say that that's something that has part of it was at the time there were CMSs, but they were like big enterprisey, very, very expensive CMSs. And those still exist today. Like, I mean, you can get your big enterprisey CMS, but like at the same
Oh, you
time,
sure can.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now there's so many other tools, there's so many different options that can fit like a smaller site that make a lot more sense in that case. Whereas back
Right.
then it really
But that
wasn't. You
also
just
can
kind of had
scale
to
pretty
decide.
high too. Like you can do a lot with anything, with any one of these open source tools too, but you need some level of expertise. And I always thought that was
Mhm.
fascinating. I once had a buddy of mine back in Wisconsin who worked for a university, and part of his job became for a little while vetting out CMSs to use for new parts of that university's site, right? And he's like, "Oh, we had a like a demo today of one of the enterprise CMSs came in and said, and if the pricing started at $1 million a year." And I was like,
Mhm.
$1 million a year. And
Jeez,
I was
yeah.
like incredulous about it at first because I'm like, what are you talking about? That's nuts, right? But then it started to occur to me that like this is a job for the whole university, and their plan was to have no tech staff at all. There's nobody on staff at all that was going to be managing
Mm.
the software that ran that thing, right? And if you think about it from that perspective, you're like, the second you hire up a technical team to be your website team, guess what else is going to cost you $1 million a year? You know,
Mm.
like that's kind of comparable almost. If it's, the same number of people, it depends on where it is and what the salaries in that area are going to be and stuff. But just a different world when you want to do something of a large technical scale, but not staff it. That's why the
Yeah,
pricing
that's
is the way
that's
it is.
true. Yeah, I thought they said AI was coming for our jobs, but apparently CMSs came for our jobs back then.
Like then.
Yeah, back then it was funny because I had this saying. I was involved in a lot of like people who evaluated a CMS, but these were like back at these enterprisey CMSs, and it was like, oh, I would always be like, oh, we got down to our finalists. I'm like, pick one, you'll hate it in a year. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. But I actually don't feel that way now. That now I feel like there's a really lot of really good tools out there. Before we go, like, tell me. I mean, other than WordPress, just give us your list of like, hey, these are the things that I'm really interested in right now when it comes to not just content, like, but also like just generally, but obviously with the content focus a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I've said probably all the things that I don't have as like an absolute ton of time to spin up everything that I see. So, I really do still use WordPress and don't hate it after all these years. So, not bad. But Astro is really a joy to work with. So, I want to give big props to that. But, I work on a Next.js app and I like working in Next too. I think they do a perfectly nice job. Although, I don't mind the distinction that they tend to draw where it's like Astro's for content and Next is for apps or whatever. I kind of think that's
Mhm.
true, or at least it feels true to me.
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean, I don't know if I have any super amazing content tools for you at the moment, It's
Is
just
your like
what it
CMS
is.
of choice always WordPress, or is it
Yeah, it
or
had,
have you
like I
changed?
used to even share an office with the Craft CMS team, and I always thought that was like a very clear, I hate to say second, but it kind of is second choice to WordPress because the technology stack is similar. And I do always appreciate their approach of like, if you're going to spin up a site here, the first thing you do essentially is build like a schema, like what are the types of content I have and what are the fields that go in there. That's
Hmm.
smart to me. Whereas WordPress gave you these defaults that to this day are pretty bloggy still. Like I know
Yes.
they've fought against that, but I'm like, dude, it's right there. Like it's very vloggy. You got to admit it. Whereas if you want to stop and be like, okay, what are all my content types and what are all the fields that go in those content types? You're immediately reaching for a plugin, which I think is wild in WordPress land. But advanced custom fields is such a big player in WordPress that if you want WordPress to pretend it's a more CMS like app, it's almost not optional to me that's involved. So I don't know. Like I think if I was gonna start something that just felt very CMSy, like you need to make a real estate listings app and there's going to be realtors, and there's going to be zones, and there's going to be homes, and there's going to be apartment buildings, and they all have these different characteristics, but they need to be tied together. I probably wouldn't pick WordPress. I'd probably pick something that is more like designed to have a customized data schema like Craft.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I think most of the headless CMSs work that way, but they don't have like kind of preset. The one that I've used that you had to do a lot of like, predefining was Sanity, because you had to sit there and code and like actually define out in great detail, which was great
Right.
in some respects, but like also had a little bit of a learning curve. So. Yeah.
Right. I never got further than the Hello World with Sanity, although it's spoken of so highly. I've met and trust the fellas. I've had him on the Shop Talk show before. I would vouch for it without even having used it. That seems like a decent choice to me as far as that type of thing. But yeah, it's very coding heavy. Like ain't nobody using that
Yeah.
isn't a coder.
Right. Yeah. Whereas like Contentful goes the other route, where it's more like, oh, easy to just kind of add fields and stuff on the visual editor. So yeah.
Right. And they're a big player too. So congrats to Contentful for being as successful and big as they are. I always just looked at the pricing page that has that weird. There's this other host I looked at today, Pantheon, that does the same thing. It's free and then it's $500 a month. You're like, that's so weird. How does that work? Contentful does the same kind of thing. Like the generous free tier, and then the second you want to pay for it, it's $300 a month. But it's great service though. So
yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time here. I think we ran out of time, unfortunately, but I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right.
And appreciate you coming out and joining us.
Likewise.
Yeah. So, and I look forward to reading more of your Chris's Corner and blog. Loving all the content. So thanks.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming to Code Thing.
Code Word.
Code Word. It's Code Word.
Yeah.
Dang it! I had the tab open.
For me, it was a play on WordPress. You would appreciate it. Like I was like WordPress Code Word.
It's great. It's an amazing name. I like even all caps. I love it.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Thanks so much.
See ya.